In this video, we'll learn how to transfer files between a Raspberry Pi and a computer remotely. From your web browser, search for and download WinSCP. For Mac and other operating systems, there are some alternatives. You need to look for and download the one that works for you. And that's what I downloaded for Windows. Yours could be a newer version. Use VNC to connect to the Raspberry Pi. Click on the Raspberry icon, Preferences, Raspberry Pi Configurations. Go to Interfaces. Enable SSH. After you press OK, it may ask you to reboot. Alternatively, you can go to the console, type in sudo space raspi-config, press enter. With your arrows, scroll down to interface options, enter, scroll down to SSH, enter, enable, yes. It's enabled, enter for OK. Scroll to finish and press enter. You might be asked to reboot. I'm gonna close the console and I will reboot anyways. VNC is now waiting for the Pi to reboot and to reconnect. The Pi is back on. I'll browse to the file I downloaded. I will install WinSCP from my admin account. Follow the standard installation process. And launch WinSCP and click Finish. Accept the defaults, but for the host name, type in the IP address of the Raspberry Pi. Username is Pi if you didn't change it, and the password for the Raspberry Pi. And log in. Accept the warning. And in the right side of this dialog, go to desktop, which is the desktop of the Raspberry Pi. This is similar to FTP software like FileZilla, where this is the remote connection. In my case, this is the Raspberry Pi. This is the desktop of the Raspberry Pi, which is this one. This is my local. In one of my local drives, I will try to create a file. I will browse to it here. I'm gonna transfer this file to the Raspberry Pi and I will see if the file went successfully to the Raspberry Pi. And I will do the reverse as well. In the desktop of the Raspberry Pi, I'm gonna right click and create a new folder. I'm gonna call it Python codes to start putting stuff in that folder. Refresh. I see the folder is in there and it's currently empty. In File Explorer, I'm gonna be creating a new text file. Give it any name. Open it, put any text into that file and save it. Browse to this location from WinSCP. You will see the file. This is still local. Drag it to the right and it will be transferred to the Raspberry Pi. You can open it from the Raspberry Pi to check. then close it again. To test a transfer from the Raspberry Pi to the local, I'm going to be deleting the file that is local. I'll try to transfer the file back from the Raspberry Pi. Deleting the local, drag to the other end. Now it came from the Raspberry Pi to the local, open to check. Now we've tested it, delete the local file. Press delete or right click, move to trash. Refresh, and we deleted the test file. We successfully managed to transfer files between a Raspberry Pi and a computer. These could be codes, could be also data files.